stories don't define you. How you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief story maker of Elkins Consulting. We share stories for many reasons, to persuade, to entertain, to connect. What we sometimes forget is the impact of the stories we tell ourselves. Whether you're sharing personal stories or business stories, how you share them makes a difference in how you remember them and in how you're perceived by the people you're interacting with. When you figure out which stories to share, difficult bosses and coworkers, successes, failures, the next step is to develop how you share them. Have you figured out your patterns, your roles in those successes, the discomfort and your challenges? In this series, you'll hear stories that will resonate with you. You'll nod your head in understanding, and then we'll dig into the lessons from each of those. How many times have you been sharing a story only to be interrupted by a person eager to share his own? When I'm working with clients on communication skills, I remind them to listen for understanding, not to respond. But during this podcast, I'm asking you to listen and consider your own related stories, to listen and consider which stories in your life might have impacted you in a similar way. Are you a good ambassador for your people? If you've ever worked in a large corporation or for a public sector agency, you've seen some pretty ridiculous policies that feel either far too broad to apply to every employee or far too specific. I believe the reason these unnecessary policies exist is that many managers and leaders struggle with conflict, and it's much easier for them to replace good management with bad policy. But you can have an impact on this by being a good ambassador for your people. An email arrived in my inbox when I worked for a small agency for the state government. As of August 1st, personal cell phone use is prohibited during working hours, except for emergencies. The talk around the office about the policy centered on the ridiculousness of it, and few people took it seriously. Others were actually insulted. Here's the story I imagined was behind the creation of that policy. Boss: I'm so tired of seeing Dan sitting at his desk and staring at his phone. He never meets deadlines, and I think it's because he's constantly distracted by texting and playing games on his phone. I'll bet he spends hours on Facebook and Instagram. I know what I'll do. I'll create a policy that people can no longer use their personal cell phones at work. That way, he'll have to put that stupid thing away and get his work done. Dan: I'm so bored. I've gone to my boss multiple times to ask for more interesting projects to work on. I've made some suggestions about what those might look like, but the only tasks he gives me require resources I don't have and input from so many others that I know there's no way I can meet his deadlines. Does this scenario sound familiar to you? There are so many ways this situation could be resolved, but every one of them requires actually talking to each other and working to speak each other's language. Instead of creating a broad policy that impacts every single employee just to address the behavior of one or a small number of employees, consider this. Talk to them. Ask them what they need to do their job well, and let them know you're concerned about the time they're spending on their phones. Document conversations and make sure you follow up with an email with bullet points to confirm what was agreed to in the discussion. The employee also has a role to fill here, of course, which includes recognizing when they're not representing themselves or other employees well. If Dan was aware that his activities on his personal cell phone would impact all of his colleagues, he might have behaved differently. The way you behave, no matter where you are, is a reflection on all the different people you may represent: a public employee, a woman, a young adult or millennial, a father. You are an ambassador for your people everywhere you go, based on your outward identity. Here's another scenario. A local government hears from a variety of visitors and residents that their town is known as dog-friendly, but that it's also known for irresponsible pet owners, people who don't pick up after their dogs at the dog park, on the trail system, or in town on other people's properties and on the sidewalks. The elected officials, in all their wisdom, come up with a solution that involves more enforcement of the policies that exist. higher fines for those who are caught not cleaning up after their dogs, and other penalties. I promise you this will not solve the problem for a variety of reasons, including the fact that it's never going to be a police priority to cite a dog owner for not picking up after their dog, and it probably shouldn't be. It's also difficult to catch people in the act. And if you don't educate people about why it's important to pick up after their dogs, they're not going to understand the reason those penalties exist. Instead, what if dog owners actually decided to be great ambassadors for their people, other dog owners? If we knew our behavior was contributing to not only a negative impression of our town, but was also the reason for an increase in fines and may ultimately have an impact on our public safety budget, do you think we would change our behavior? As I hiked down the mountain behind my house with my friend, who is not a dog owner, we saw a filled dog poop bag next to the trail. I could tell my friend was tempted to judge the person who left it there. Her expression said what her words didn't. I've done that before. I've left the dog poop bag near the trail on my way up, so I don't have to carry it for the entire hike up the mountain and then back down. And then I come back down this way to pick it up on my way home. I have to admit, though, that sometimes I forget and come back down a different path, and that's why, and I bent to pick up the other dog owner's poop bag, sometimes I call myself the dog poop fairy and pick these up when I see them on my way back down the mountain. Did you hear that? I explained why people leave the bags, admitted that sometimes I do that, and then demonstrated what a good ambassador for dog owners looks like. It wasn't hard. Even if no one sees your dog poop on public or private property, you still represent all dog owners when you don't pick that shit up. So, are you a good ambassador for the people you represent at any given time? It's not easy and it's not fair that people generalize so quickly based on first and physical impressions, but that's the way it is. Humans are designed to identify a threat or a friend in seconds when they see them. If people know me to be a dog owner, I represent all dog owners with my behavior. If people know me to be Jewish, a woman, a public sector employee, then I represent all of those people, and my behavior has an impact on all of those people. And on the flip side, when was the last time you generalized a judgment based on an experience with a single person in a specific situation? Did you notice yourself passing judgment on all dog owners, on all millennials, on all New Yorkers or Parisians based on limited experience with people who might fit that description? My friend Amber Johnson hosted a fantastic conference for the Women's Leadership Network here in Helena, and she offered some guidelines at the beginning of that conference a few days ago. And the one that really struck me was this: don't freeze someone in time. Amber asked the audience of around 150 women in the room whether they had ever said or done something they wish they could undo. She asked if we had ever said something stupid and rash, and everyone in the room raised their hands, of course. And then she explained that we often freeze someone in time, making a judgment about them based on one thing they said or did, or allowing that judgment to impact their relationship with that person. She suggested that when we heard something in the room we weren't sure of, we might ask clarifying questions before jumping to conclusions about that person. Now, addressing these challenges requires we look at them from both points of view. Am I a good ambassador for my people? Am I making judgments of a person or a whole community of people based on very limited experience? This week, think about all the communities of people you represent. Try being aware of your behavior in terms of how you're representing those people and yourself, and try to acknowledge your own snap judgments based on limited experiences with people. I certainly don't like to be lumped in with a description of all Americans are one thing or another. And when I hear people say anything, whether it's good or bad, about an entire community of people, all Americans, all Parisians, all Californians, all dog owners. I think about the diversity of this incredible world and how unlikely it is that any community could possibly be all one thing or all another. Thank you for listening to Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Share Them Will. Please visit my website for more podcast episodes, blog posts, and information about how I can help you develop and share your stories at elkinsconsulting.com. Listen to me, honey, while I say, how could you tell me that you're going away? Don't say